Last up is Steve Mihaylo, and I think so much of Steve and his career and what I've seen. We've been covering him for so long. It's, I think I still had hair back then, and not to suggest that Steve's old. It was me. Steve, you got a wonderful career. I thought rather than read about that, we might just talk our way through that one a little bit, and tell me a little bit about the highlights of your career and some of the great memories you have of how you got started and rose to become an Entrepreneur of the Year award winner from Ernst & Young, which was one of the many highlights in your career.
You know, Don, I'd have to go back quite a ways, but I think all of the things that were mentioned on the stage about being an entrepreneur or being a risk taker are true. But adversity is the one thing that I didn't hear. My parents were divorced when I was 9 years old. I won't tell you when that was, but it was a long time ago. And I became the patriarch of the family. My mother did domestic work. My father was a policeman. There was never any money. Wound up in foster homes. Now, I could have taken the approach that I was a victim. Instead, I went out and got a job at 9 years old. Thank you.
We can all give
to
it
all
up.
the
Come
job
on,
and risk takers. Thank you.
There you go.
And at 9, 10, 11 years old, I was delivering as many papers on a bicycle as grown-ups were delivering in cars. I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do it. We had a drive for subscriptions later on when I was about 12. And I asked the route manager, I said, well, what was the previous record? And he said, well, it was 50 subscriptions in one day. I decided I was going to break that record. I didn't care if I broke it by 1 or 5, it didn't matter. I was going to get at least 51 subscriptions. Now, you'd say, well, how were you going to do it? You have to have a little bit of a plan. Not a detailed plan, but I figured I'd have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd start knocking on doors at 6 o'clock. And the last door I would knock on would be 11:59 that night, so I'd get it done in one day. So that's about 18 hours. It takes 3 per hour to get you over the hump. And that was my plan. Now, I could have done it in a single-family neighborhood and walk, 50 feet or 100 feet between houses. I decided to do it in apartment buildings because they were closer together. I could see more people. At 6 o'clock in the morning, people buy from you because they want to get rid of you. Same thing happens at 11 o'clock at night. They just want to get rid of you. So I had a pretty good close ratio in the morning and at night, and during the day it wasn't quite as good. But at the end of the day, I knocked out my 54th subscription. The next weekend I went back and he was asking the kids, well, how many did you get, Johnny? He said, well, I got 12. How many did you get, Billy? I got 14. They finally got around to me and I said 54. He said, no, you didn't. That's impossible. I said, yes, I did. How did you get 54? Well, you told me it was 50 was the previous record, and I wanted to break the record. He said, well, I was just kidding. It was only 15. So I will tell you this, you don't want to put limits on yourselves. That's why my friends call me No Limits. I don't put artificial limits on myself. Nothing is impossible. That's one of the things you talked about Steve Jobs and his, what'd you call it, the reality? Distortion. Yeah, the reality distortion field. That's just another way of saying reality is what you make reality to be. And I knew Steve Jobs. We both went public about the same time. He went public in December of 1980. My company went public in February of 1981. We bumped into each other a lot at investor conferences and things like that. Steve Jobs was also not a big person for market research. He was not a big person for, business plans and things like that. He knew when he looked out there what people needed because he was curious. He asked people a lot of questions. He read a lot. He traveled a lot. And that's what I would encourage all of you to do, when you leave college, is That's just the beginning of your education. I'll give you another example. How many of you have spent 3 years getting your college education? Anyone here? But you've already gotten your undergraduate degree in 3 years. Anyone? How about 4 years? A few of you, 5 years. You want to take a guess how long it took me to get my accounting degree, accounting and finance degree? Can you see what that is? It's 2 fingers. You say, well, how could you do that? Well, you have to get 24 credits per semester, and you have to get that many in the summertime, and you can do it in 2 years. And if you were poor the way I was, you also have to work full-time. Well, how can you work full-time and go to school? You work from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. in the morning. That's how it's done. So I carried 24 credits per semester, and accounting is, as Jeff can tell you, is not...
Brain damage.
It's brain damage, especially when you're taking
nicely.
300 and 400 and 500 courses, you know, advanced accounting courses. And I sat for the CPA exam, passed it the first time I sat for it. But how do you get 24 credits during the summer? It's physically impossible, people told me, because you can only carry 6 credits per summer session, and there's 2 in a summer session. That adds up to 12. Very simple. You go to 2 universities, and you get them close enough that you can get between your classes. The 2 universities I went to were 11 miles apart. And that's how it's done. And I'm not saying I'm bright. I couldn't pass the SAT the first time I took it. So I had to go to a junior college for 1 year and a 4-year college for a year after that. When I started my own business, the same thing. You know, no one would give me capital. That didn't stop me. Every time somebody told me it was impossible, you can't do that, I said, logically, I think I can. You know, from a common sense standpoint, I think it's possible. Remember the little engine that could? How many of you have ever read the book Atlas Shrugged? Any of you in this room? Quite a few of you. It was written in 1957. It's a novel, and it's metaphorical. Everything in it is a metaphor for something that's happening in your life. And if you think that human nature has changed in the last 10,000 years, you're wrong. All you have to do is look at history, be a student of history, read. As Don was saying, we have more information through the Google search engine that Jamie is, you know, an evangelist for, than we ever had when I was your age. As Jamie also pointed out, you know, all of you in this room are natives. You're native to what was called the internet. We call it the cloud now. You're native to search engines. You're native to smartphones. You're native to all of these tools that didn't exist 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Take advantage of it. Don't use it as just a device to talk on. Don't use it as just a device to search for things. Use it as much as possible. And you say, well, how does an old guy like me know all this stuff? I'm curious. I ask questions. I read. I've got over 50 books on my Droid, which happens to be a Google operating system. Those are the types of things you do. Never take no for an answer. There are no limits. The limits are set right up here. And that's the difference. And for those of you that have been honed through adversity, you've got a leg up on everyone else. Look at Jamie here, a first generation American. You went to a public university, so did I. You don't have to go to Harvard. And, you know, if you went to Harvard or MIT, Matt, I apologize, but...
Cornell, right.
Well, Cornell,
Yeah,
that's
good.
a good school.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're known for hotel management. You see, how do I know these things? I read, I study, I ask a lot of questions. I never sit down on a plane without introducing myself to the people around me. And I start talking to them. You're that guy, huh? I'm that guy. I'm that guy.
Keep the plugs in the ears when he comes.
But you know what? I'm also a salesman. And as a kid, I was terribly, terribly shy, introverted. You say, well, that's not the right personality for being a salesman. Guess what? You're a winner if you just show up. Look at all the empty seats around you. Those are filled with losers. All of you are the winners. Sometimes that's all it takes to win. You just show up. But then if you go the extra mile, the extra 10 miles, the extra 100 miles, just think what you can accomplish. And I agree with what Jamie said and what Jeff and Adam and Matt said. We have more opportunity today than we've ever had in the history of mankind. And you know why? There are so many people that don't show up. Showing up is standing by their mailbox waiting for a check from the government. That's not showing up, my friends. Showing up is getting out there, getting a job, even if it requires flipping burgers, and I've done a lot of that in my life. It builds self-esteem. You can't succeed without self-esteem. And never, ever be a victim. I don't care what your circumstances are. You're not a victim. And you can do it. And that's how I did it.
I think it's awesome. Why don't we give him a hand for sharing that story with us, huh?